So welcome everybody. I'm Joanne Lee, and this is Margit and Joanne. We are Trillium Awakening teachers, and so this is the third in a series of three living stage talks about this particular path of awakening. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about mutuality. I'm going to fill in the blanks from the session 1 and session 2 very briefly. But tonight is really focused on mutuality. Somebody wandered through earlier, as happens here a lot, and said, what are you doing? And I told her we were going to be talking about mutuality, and I got that kind of trout look, like, what is that? So, yeah. For me, so the other word that we use sometimes is relatedness, which tends to strike more of a chord for people. And I hesitate a little bit to go here, but on the other hand, I can't not go here. We are living in such a polarized world and time. And it's really the nature of the universe, We live in a universe of duality. It's always been that way, but more recently, that duality and that polarity has seemed to permeate every aspect of life, and particularly politics. So for me, this notion of mutuality that we're going to engage in, talk about a little bit, but I'd really like engagement with all of you too, seems even more relevant than ever. So I'm actually going to start with a poem, and then I'll fill in those other two areas that we've talked about very briefly. And then we're going to talk a little bit about mutuality, define what it is and what it's not, and then do some imagining together. Margit and I are just freshly back from the annual Trillium Awakening Teachers Retreat, so we're new teachers, and this was our first opportunity to be at the retreat. Margit was one of the presenters because the teachers know a brilliant thing when they see it. And I didn't know this was going to happen, but the very first conversation at the retreat among these 25 or so teachers was mutuality. So I got to jot some notes and take some quotes. And then we'll talk a little bit, we'll have question and answers, of course, and then talk a little bit about upcoming events and other places you might engage with us. So this is I guess I would call it a poem that I wrote sometime over the last few months using a writing process that I teach called Create. And it speaks to me of this notion of mutuality. I was a hidden treasure, hidden under layers of sediment, years of living, the weight of experience, belief, and assumption. Hidden under the past, masquerading as the present, threatening to dance its crazed dance far into the future. There is an ease to repeating the known, to hanging on to the old, to settling for the illusion of safety. But I desire to be known, to myself, to my beloved, to others. A deep, burning desire that refuses to be quenched by any or all that's gone before. There is a necessary disrobing, a required nakedness to be known, a peeling away of layers of habit, of illusion, of assumption, of confusion. The treasure lies within, the Holy Grail, in the temple of my being, to be excavated by surrender. No archaeological dig will get me there, no proven method of healing, no blinding wisdom or guidance from without. My treasure, my being, my path, my way. Not a solitary way. The deep desire to be known reaches out towards the other, towards the unknowable, seeking, groping for connection, reaching for the light that floods back to illuminate myself, my treasure. Reaching out to find myself reaching in, a Mobius strip of relating, a ribbon of reunion, an anchor in the sea of possibility. I cannot see myself without your eyes. I cannot hear myself without your ears. I cannot feel myself without your hands. I cannot love myself without your heart. I cannot reveal my treasure without your light. I cannot extricate myself from this web of being. I cannot excuse myself from this raucous life. I cannot sit out this dance, tune out this song. My desire to be known cannot be ignored. My desire to be known cannot be silenced. My desire to be known is the path my gifts walk. Others' gifts call forth my desire. My desire calls forth others' gifts. I have a closing poem too, but it's short. That's longer than many of the things that I write. So let me talk just a little bit. Welcome. Wonderful to have you here. Let me talk just a little bit about this threefold path of awakening that we call Trillium Awakening. And most people living here know the trillium is a native flower, has 3 petals, and then 3 leaves. And so our 3 aspects that we engage with and that work us are awakening to consciousness. That's a typical, common, familiar to most people sort of beacon on any spiritual path, is that increase in awakening to consciousness. The second petal in our work is embodiment, and that gets a lot of press these days too. On other paths, you'll hear people talk about waking up, and we talk about waking down. So it's bringing that consciousness into every cell of our being and every aspect of who we are as humans, with all of its messiness and joy and everything in between. And then the third petal is mutuality. So that is the relatedness that we're going to be talking about tonight and engaging in tonight. So we did an evening just talking about consciousness and did a consciousness exercise, and we did a talk last month about embodiment. So this is our third and final. You want to add anything or jump in here?
No, I feel in flow with you. You're doing great. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
So the waking to consciousness, the embodied waking to consciousness and mutuality, we call whole being realization. So mutuality is whole being relatedness. So it's relating to the entirety, the total and true nature of ourselves and of the other. I just was chatting beforehand with one of the folks here, and the idea of vulnerability came up. So to me, mutuality is grounded in, and I would say dependent on, vulnerability, which is something that certainly for me was an acquired taste that came later in life. And not something that we often engage in our families of origin or in our workplaces. I think it's happening more and more, which is a good thing. For mutuality to be present and to be experienced, vulnerability has to be there. So we're talking about our truth, which of course is always a partial truth. We can't ever know the entirety of ourselves, let alone anybody else, but to share who we are and what's happening for us, including our thoughts and our feelings and our sensations, and the impact that we're having on others and that they're having on us. All of that is based in vulnerability. There's also a leaning into trust. We call it trust in being. So the woman that came by earlier, I said it was something about a spiritual talk, and she said, "You mean about God?" And I said, yes. We use the word being. You might use the word God, you might use the word goddess, you might use the word universal intelligence, or you might not have a word. So when I say being, it's with a capital B. So mutuality, it's easy to think that it's something that we do. And to some degree that can be true, but it's also something that we be, or some way that we be. Unity consciousness is another concept that has a lot of familiarity for people, this notion that we are all one. And mutuality is the recognition of that. So I am you as you are me, as we are all together. And when that is experienced in a conscious and a bodily way, then you're in a state of mutuality with everything. It's not just people, it's everything. Everything there is. Seeing the other as self, and this orientation, I believe, draws us into an ethical way of being, an ethical way of acting, of speaking, of doing, of practicing whatever it is that we practice. One way that we do it, as we're learning this path, is through what we call whole being listening. So this, for me, I come from a background, professional background as a coach, so many, many years of listening and learning to listen well. And I thought I was pretty good at it. And then this upped the ante significantly. So if I'm listening to you 100%, that's fabulous. People want to be heard and they want to be seen, and that's important. Whole being listening means I'm listening to you 100%, and I'm listening to me 100%, and maybe to everything else 100%, so 300% listening, or, there's no number, obviously, but it is this way of being so totally embedded in the present moment that we are sensitive on all different kinds of levels, not just to thoughts that emerge, but to words that are coming, to feelings, to sensations. And when we meet together as a community, here in Olympia or anywhere for that matter, we are practicing that kind of listening, and it magically transforms relationship and groups. Another, there's kind of a funny term that we use for reparation. If someone is hurt by something that we've said or done, or offended or impacted in some way, we call it coconut yoga, and the idea is that our head hits the floor, hits the ground like a coconut, and it's a willingness to say, I'm sorry that you're suffering. And it's not even necessarily an admission that I did anything wrong, but just this recognition that if you're suffering, I'm suffering, and so I'm sorry for that suffering. And being willing to come forward with that. The way we be as mutualites, sometimes we use that term, is our awakening in consciousness. So we're grounded in consciousness. Consciousness is all that is. And so if we are resting in that, then inevitably we're being with whomever and whatever else is present. We have another term that we use, a lot of vocabulary in the dharma, in the teaching, and some of it's moving and shifting and changing. Out of necessity, these are not easy things to talk about. Like our English language is not, I don't think, a particularly facile way of talking about spiritual concepts, but I don't know Sanskrit, so this is all we got. So we have a term onlyness, and that is, it's also this notion that there is only this. This is everything, and there is only this. So it's the onlyness, which is another way of being, and being mutual, our non-separateness. And then the last way I just want to mention, in case anybody has experience with Patricia Albert's We Space, so that's another evolutionary edge to the spiritual world, I think, is this notion that we awaken, we can awaken as individuals, even though we are connected. And her work and our work in Trillium is this recognition and honoring the fact that we are awakening as humanity. We are awakening as groups with identity, and also, if we have that intention with anyone that wants to plug into that field, that shared field. And what can happen there is really quite remarkable. So I used the term magical earlier, and it's a mystery. So there's another M word. It's a mystery, and we cannot, I don't think, and ever will be able to totally define our terms or the experiences. And yet, when we can relax into and trust, there are things that happen that wouldn't happen otherwise. They wouldn't happen when we're stuck in our patterned behaviors. So what is mutuality not? It's not always being nice. It's not living happily ever after. It's not always being in agreement. It's not the end of conflict. So it's easy to idealize mutuality and want to get away from that messiness of life and that messiness of relating to other people. And mutuality won't get you there, sorry. On the contrary, I think it really, it asks us to lean in. And when we lean in, there can be even more challenge, more conflict, more difference, more disagreement. And if we truly are in a mutual space and we truly are trusting that, then there's a way through. And we've experienced that lots and lots. And we've also experienced endings of things, endings of, relationships or organizations, and that's all a part of it too. It doesn't mean it's not, that we're not being mutual. So one of the things that came up in the workshop that we were just at was a notion that we're standing in, abiding, resting in our true and total nature, and making space for and allowing the other's true and total nature. So we're standing in, abiding, resting in our true and total nature. So our true nature, I think, is when we think of being fully expressed as spiritual beings, that's our true nature. But our total nature is actually the human part too. So that can be the irritation, the anger, the grief, the bad habits. That's our total nature. That is who we are. And the denial of that really just causes more suffering. The acceptance of it and the recognition of it is a pathway, I think, is a pathway to further growth and development. So we don't want to exile parts of ourselves. I mean, most of us are pretty good at that. We've been doing it most of our lives. We've learned how to do it from our families of origin and our culture. But when we start welcoming those exiled parts back, we become more whole, and it releases energy for consciousness to come in. And also, there's the possibility with others of merging with them, which is a temptation. And this mutuality is not merging with someone else either. So it's one of the paradoxes of our work. There are many paradoxes in our dual universe and in this work. And so one of them is that we are separate, but we're also one. And that doesn't mean we're merged. So we honor our separateness at the same time that we recognize our unity. Respect was something that was mentioned as a fundamental anchor of mutuality, is that we are respecting the other, that we fundamentally trust being, expressing as the other, as well as ourselves. And we can't know how that's going to happen until it happens. So that trust becomes a very potent force to lean into and to relax into. One of the things that Margit said at the workshop was to be willing to be affected by others and also to be willing to be changed by others. So again, defensiveness is something that we learn and that we unconsciously practice, and that's, trying not to be affected by, impacted by others, defending ourselves against change, which can be scary and hard and uncomfortable. So just that willingness and that intention opens up a lot of space. So I think the only other thing I want to say about it is that mutuality also relies on self-awareness and self-knowledge. And that's a big part of growing and developing as a human being, is becoming more and more aware of who we are and how we are, and accepting that. We call it green lighting in our work, so giving ourselves permission to be all of who we are. Even the parts that we don't like and we don't want other people to see, we still accept them and welcome them in. How are we doing time-wise? Oh, good. Anything coming?
There's some bubblings.
You want to jump in, or?
Sure. You
Okay.
feel
Yeah.
finished with that piece?
Yeah.
I just got back from California at 3:30 after having done some pretty intense work for 4 days. And when Joanne emailed me this outline for today's talk, I'm like, all right, where's my cocktail? This is really great.
Mutuality at work.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed hearing your brilliance come through there. That was really well done and beautifully articulated. That was delicious.
Thank you.
It's great that this will be recorded, so it'll be available to others for sharing. I feel the piece that I want to add is just to acknowledge that the embodied awakening process is natural. It's a potential that's available for all of us. And really the art of embodied awakening is cooperating with it. So the degree to which I resist what's true for me is makes it harder for the awakening to happen, because I'm locked. There's a resistance to life, and embodied awakening is recognizing that you're everything, landing in everything, being everything, including the apparently separate self. So I may not even be aware of the ways that I'm shut down until I rub up against someone else. Like when I'm home alone, life goes pretty smoothly. And then interacting with my beloved partner, I find my rigidity, the places where I'm impatient or insensitive, blind. And so you might wonder, well, why even have mutuality as part of the spiritual path? But in order to land here fully, I need to encounter myself. And that's why your poem is so beautiful, as I see myself through the other, and then I can say, oh, there's wounding there. There's something tender. So the degree to which we're willing to really engage another or others, and being willing to listen how we're impacting them, will catalyze the awakening process. The more you lean in, the more will be evoked. The more that's evoked is more available to be integrated. And when things integrate, the nervous system can settle down and relax a little bit. And when that happens, there's more awareness. It's not bound in the constrictions anymore as much. And as we soften and relax and aren't as reactive, there's the ability to start sensing into the bigger dimensions of who and what we are. More subtle, more profound. So mutuality is actually a highly catalytic engagement and a core part of this work. Another thing I want to mention is that there's an alchemy. Like mutuality is much bigger than the sum of the two parts. So when my partner and I are in a tender place with each other, there can be an impulse to try to fix. Like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable and you're doing it wrong. You know, there's a inclination to blame or to fix to just get out of the discomfort. But if I can speak my truth, and ideally vulnerably, my tenderness, and if he can speak his tenderness, and if we can burn in the not knowing together, then things shift. There's this profound alchemy where my heart is penetrated by his vulnerability and vice versa, and then what happens is this natural generosity emerges and something evolves. So it's completely unpredictable. Things can shift, problems can be solved, not from here, but because being has moved through us. And we just came out of a weekend where our group did that kind of work, and it's quite profound. So I just wanted to mention that it's not a minor thing. And even post-awakening, in this path, awakening doesn't require perfection. You get to awaken as this lumpy, bumpy human with all its quirky and ticks and itches. And so after awakening, there's a lot of work to do, so to speak. There's a lot to be still integrated. I still have abandonment issues from childhood that come up in the most unexpected ways, that are still wanting to come home into conscious embrace. So post-awakening mutuality is very important. We were just spent a weekend with people who've been in this work 20 years, have been embodied, conscious, awake, 20 years, and there's still these tender places that get evoked in relationship to other. And we all know about these brilliant gurus who do all sorts of unethical things. That's because the shadow hasn't been integrated. So in our work, we have 40-something teachers, and we hold each other accountable, and we hold up the mirrors with love and compassion, say, you got a blind spot here. And then become more whole, more able to respond to life. And I could go on for a long while, but I think I'll stop right there. So I hope that helps you see that it's just a critical part of this awakening process.
Yeah, thanks. And that sparks things for me, of course. So mutuality really is, I think, if not one of the most distinguishing factors of this particular path of awakening. So I just had not encountered it in any work before with this kind of integration and, integral aspect. Even though spiritual community is something that, we've seen forever, I think a lot of spiritual communities have had such difficulties because mutuality wasn't articulated, wasn't recognized, wasn't honored. And, as I said earlier, denial's a pretty powerful thing. We just sweep it under the rug or blame the other. I guess the other thing, just quickly, that I would say is that this mutuality in particular, our entire path is a balance of the deep feminine and the deep masculine, the healthy feminine and the healthy masculine. And the work originated 25 years ago to some degree as a reaction against hyper-masculine culture. And we're all intimately familiar with that, unfortunately. Or not, we are. And so within our work, there has been a deep feminine tendency to sort of compensate. And there's a lot of holding and loving and embracing and welcoming and all that wonderful stuff. And after, a decade or a couple of decades, there's a recognition that there is a place for the healthy masculine, and that is the taking action, the perseverance, the intention. And I think mutuality is very much, it can be both, but I think it needs that edge of masculine energy to really work its magic. So I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I want to lead you in a short meditation visualization, if you're willing, before that. So if you would, if it's comfortable, to close your eyes and just kind of get comfortable where you're sitting, letting yourself relax and bringing your awareness within. So I want you to imagine what your family would be like if the people in your family were awakening intentionally on a path of awakening, practicing mutuality. Just see what bubbles up. I usually do my visualization disclaimer. However you do it is right. You can't do it wrong. You might get images, you might get feelings, thoughts. It's all good. So let's shift our focus now to work. Your work in the world. What would that be like if the people that you're working with and for were on a path of awakening? That was the central axis in their life. And then we're going to broaden our scope a little bit. We're going to think about our community. What would our community be like if people were on a path of awakening, intentionally pursuing that? City government, our politicians, our teachers, professionals of all sorts. And then what would our country be like if everyone were on a path of awakening? What might be different? And what would your life be like if mutuality were your prime motivator? Every interaction was based on mutuality. So take your time, and when you're ready, just let your eyes open slowly and bring your focus back to this room. So I'd like to open it up now. You've been listening to me. I'd love to hear your voices. How was that for you? What bubbled up? Or any questions, comments that came up throughout the evening? Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm going to repeat your question, which we haven't been doing at other presentations because nobody can hear you but me. So the question was, could you please describe the three petals again? So just the basis of our work. So the name of the path is Trillium Awakening. And I bring my handy-dandy visual aid. I don't know. That's our local Trillium. So three petals. And the 3 petals are consciousness, so awakening to consciousness. And the second petal is embodiment, so bringing that consciousness into our, bringing that divinity into our humanity. And then the third petal is mutuality. Yeah, you're welcome. Glad you came. We do a lot of events locally, and so in a way, yes. I don't know if we'll be doing them here. We do intro nights at various places around the community regularly. The teachers do what are called sittings. In the Eastern tradition, they call them satsang, so it's, usually there is some teaching, some short teaching, but a lot of it is about practicing mutuality and people sharing where they are on their own path, and then the rich learning and loving that happens as a result of that. And then we also pretty regularly, almost every quarter, have a weekend workshop. So we bring teachers. We have here in Olympia been bringing teachers in from other parts of the country for 5 years. And Margit and I now are offering workshops since we're teachers, so we'll be offering one in, I think, November. And I think we have 2 Fairfield, Iowa teachers coming in September. We have several good sites right now, and so we haven't had to rent space. So there's an east side. Yeah, so we do sittings regularly, at least once a month. Yeah, and then we have about 30 committed, what I would call committed practitioners here in Olympia, and about 30 more people that might come to an event like this or come to a sitting. And those core members, those 30 committed members, meet every month also in smaller groups. So there's something happening a lot. And then there can be social stuff too. Cindy hosted a party recently, has hosted a couple of parties, and we'll get together and just hang, not have it be so serious or formal. Yeah. Yeah. What does it look like? What does the practice of mutuality look like? It looks like this. It looks like, it can look very different depending on the interaction. So it could look like conflict, if we are disagreeing about something and we are both committed to engaging and honoring the other in that disagreement. So it could look like an argument sometimes. Oh, okay. So more in the sitting situation, we have a fairly consistent way of being. So we might do like a 3-word check-in to just kind of get in the room and get present. We gaze with each other, so that's one of our practices. Gaze, G-A-Z-E, gaze. So it's just meeting the other's gaze, and we do it silently and usually for about a minute. So it's a way of meeting the other, and then whatever comes up, comes up. Sometimes nothing, sometimes a lot. And then the teacher usually will lead a discussion on some topic, like tonight we're talking about mutuality. And then we have people, and then people share where they are in their process, and we practice that whole being listening. So somebody might be suffering, and I might have an urge to give them advice or try to fix or even sympathize. And so it's really important that I just honor where they're at and trust that what's happening for them is happening perfectly for reasons I can't understand. And then honor whatever's coming up in me too. Oh, there's my coach wanting to put her coach hat on and, give you 3 good ideas or whatever, Does that answer your question? Yeah, you bet.
But we don't give advice. So you want to...
Yeah, so we don't fix, we don't give advice.
I understand well that you are trying to hold this coach inside.
I'm recognizing her and I can reassure her that she has a place to practice, but this isn't it. This is not the time or the place. But it's important for me to recognize when that impulse comes up. Yeah. And to, this gets back to that piece about trust, to trust that if this person is suffering, it's not my place to, I can want to ease the suffering, and I can feel love and compassion for them, and there's some purpose that I can't know. I don't often know it in my own life till I can look back in hindsight. Yeah, did you have a... We have PhDs. Not we. Well, actually, Margit's closer than me. There's a full range of academic expertise that shows up in our community, and full range of different kinds of professions. We're kind of heavily loaded towards coaches, counselors, therapists, energy workers, healers, but that's just because we're in Olympia, I think. Sort of a cross cut. But, it's interesting you bring that up, because at the teachers' retreat, we were beginning to identify the qualities of what I would call a master teacher. That's not what we call them, but that's my language. And somebody said, well-educated. And most of my life I would have gone, yep. But one of the most potent teachers in this work is a man named Alan Morlock. He has a landscaping business. He grew up in the Southeast. He calls himself a hillbilly mystic. And it's not that he's not brilliant, but he doesn't have much formal education, And he's just this big heart, this big embracing heart. There's a tremendous impact on his students and other people. Alan Morlock. We have a library, a lending library, and so we have a couple of his books. Nothing More, is that the name of his? Nothing More?
I don't remember the titles.
Yeah. No, he's in New Jersey. We've had him here. He was one of those weekend workshops, he and his partner Gina. Yeah. The gazing that I was talking about, we do that. That's a regular part of our community events and sittings and workshops, and we love it. It's just a really yummy way to meet somebody. And many of the teachers actually have gazing videos online, so you can gaze with them virtually. And so I think Alan has a gazing video. The other thing is Buddha at the Gas Pump, batgap.com, batgap.com. And there's a fabulous interview with Alan, as well as many other Trillium teachers. So what else? Questions or... What came up during the imagining? Anything anyone wants to share? Yeah.
I was thinking about what would it look like in mutuality, or interacting with everyone in a mutual and I think compassionate sense. I think maybe mutuality and compassion they go hand in hand, and I'm curious your thoughts in this time. I feel like we're all so reactionary right now, and that someone will say something, whether that be a political figure or in our own relationships or at Evergreen. I
Yeah.
have to think about that right now. And,
Sure.
And the other side, because also I think along with this reactionary stuff is this dichotomous thinking of like us versus them. The other side will just react, and they seem irreconcilable. But then from an observer standpoint, you're like, why can't you see the way you're being? You're just shutting down how we get to a place of more mutuality.
I think I'm thinking in terms of another M word, mediation. You have to have two willing participants for mediation to work. And, I think you can do mutuality, you can be mutual with someone even if they're not. I don't advocate and, wouldn't recommend standing for abuse of any kind or anything that's harmful to the being. In that case, then what has how to be the most compassionate is to remove yourself. So I know there's things happening at Evergreen that are pretty yucky, pretty awful. But I hear the yearning in you, the yearning, the longing, and also the recognition that this has got to be possible. There's got to be the way to bridge this, and I share that. I share that orientation with you, and so it can be frustrating to have that not happen or not appear to happen. So reaction is a natural and normal part of being human. I react to things still. We had a lot of reaction at the workshop this weekend with very advanced practitioners of this work. So in mutuality, if we can in the moment, we own our reaction. Wow, I'm feeling really reactive. I'm stirred up. I'm hurt. I'm whatever. Or if we can't do it in the moment, then I go away and I come back later and I say, wow, Rebecca, when we had that conversation, I was so reactive. And, coconut yoga, I'm so sorry if that caused suffering for you. And here's what I've been able to figure out as a result of going off somewhere and being with it. Yeah, so sometimes that doesn't happen. I mean, that's the full range of humanity that we have on the planet.
Can I add a little
Yes,
something?
please.
And having had a weekend of intense polarization, the doorway to reconciliation is creating a safe enough space to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. If you can't be vulnerable, then the defenses are running the show. So what does it take to create an environment where vulnerability can happen? And that's one of the main reasons why in our circles we don't do fixing and advising, because the subtle message in fixing and advising is you shouldn't be the way you are right now. Let's get you out of here. Let's just make you feel better as quickly as possible. When the doorway is through, what's in the way is the way. So if you go into fixing and trying to manipulate yourself or the other, you're not going through the doorway of transformation. So what kind of environment creates that doorway of transformation and healing?
Yeah, we have guidelines for our behavior, our mutuality and behavior in sittings and workshops. And many of us come with those tools already in our toolkit. But if not, then, people learn this is the way we interact in this community. This is what's expected and respected and most effective. This is what works. Now, it doesn't mean that, Debbie and I might not go off somewhere and do something else and not necessarily active listen to each other, or, it's just, how mindful can we be? Mindfulness is a practice. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Are you Katrina? Yeah. Hi. Yeah. So Trillium emerged originally as a body of work called Waking Down in Mutuality. So kind of similar, three aspects. The founder is a man named Samuel Bonder. Sanyal had been a devotee of Adi Da, another guru, spiritual teacher, for 20 or 25 years, and had not awakened, and at some point claimed the means of his own realization. And for him, that meant leaving his work with Adi Da. So he forged his own path. He awakened pretty quickly, and the other word we haven't used here tonight is transmission. So this spiritual path has a very specific DNA. Every path does. Catholic is different from Judaism, is different from Buddhism, is different from Adi Daism, is different from Trillium. So Sanyal's transmission was quite strong, is quite strong, and people were attracted to him and curious, and so in that mutuality and association, people started to awaken, and then other teachers came into the path. So it has a short history in the sense of, it's not thousands of years old like Buddhism, but it does have a lineage. The teachers now are from all different walks, and so in some ways now it's more like, I don't know, I want to say melting pot. That's kind of an overused phrase, and you don't hear it in the spiritual world much, but it was something that really attracted me to this work, that it wasn't guru-centric. I've never been a follower of a guru, and it wasn't attractive to me, but to have 45 different teachers with 45 different orientations, one basic teaching, but coming through in very, very different ways. So that was, I think that's another way that this work is distinguished from a lot of spiritual paths. Not that there's anything wrong with gurus, blessed be, but yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes. Yeah, the recognition that it's that recognition that we're all separate and unique as well as all one. And that it's going to come through. You've heard Margit and I tonight. We have very different things to say and to offer. And yeah, exactly.
One way that I like to look at the teachings of Trillium is their mystery is infinite. So every school, every path is a way of slicing mystery into a package that can be communicated and digested. So, the teachings are only valuable to the degree they support you in the natural process of embodied awakening. So we don't ask you to believe any of it. You try it on. Does this work? Are things shifting? Does this make sense, literally, in my senses? So there are core teachings. It's up to you how you relate to them and how they support you. Yeah, in fact, the other teacher in Olympia, Don Fries, that was his doorway into Trillium was, I don't have to be like you. This is this misunderstanding is that my awakening is going to be like Sanyal's. Like we all have to have Sanyal's awakening, but really it's what does mine look like and how does mine contribute to this body? Mm-hmm. So your awakening will be there'll be certain characteristics. This is a very specific and nameable thing that happens, but how it shows up for you will be unique. And by you having your awakening and bringing it to the community, it complexifies the whole thing and adds to it, and it's really quite powerful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The whole thing's evolving. Mutuality is evolving. We just had a conversation about mutuality. What does it mean now, 20 years later?
It's about 25 years. Trillium Awakening, this particular name resulted when Sanyal left the organization. So an organization grew up with teachers and 501c3 and all those kinds of things that happen. And he left 3 years ago. And he wanted the waking down in mutuality. He felt ownership of that brand. It's funny to talk about spiritual brands, but here we are in 21st century America. So Trillium Awakening is a new name. same teachings, same history, same teachers, same body of teachers. Just Samuel and his wife Linda have gone off, and they had already created another institute, and he's one of these creative geniuses that is prolific and always generating new material and new things, and he had really been slowly separating himself from the rest of the organization. Yeah. So I think it's about 7. I want to just mention a couple of upcoming things, and I'm going to read a very short poem, a Rumi poem, and then formally close, but we can stay and hang out and talk. So the next event is actually a sitting that I'm holding on Sunday, July 2nd from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at my studio. So that's, if you're interested in events, you can always find them on the website, so www.trilliumolympia.org. And you can sign up for our mailing list, and then announcements of sittings go out to anyone on the mailing list. And then the next sitting is July 21st, and that's Margit's sitting on a Friday night from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. We're having a workshop in September. I don't have dates for it yet, but it's CL and Jeffrey Backstrom, who are Fairfield, Iowa teachers. And I think I can call them shamans, right? I mean, I don't know if they use that term for themselves, but they do pilgrimages to Peru regularly, and just amazing, amazing folks. CL has been one of my primary teachers in this work. And then Krishna Gauchi is another relatively local teacher in Portland, and he does satsangs, so he has a very strong Eastern tradition, Hindu tradition, or Tibetan tradition. And he's having a satsang this Wednesday, June 21st, and then a virtual one on June 25th. So again, there are links to those events and opportunities on our website.
Can I say one?
Yeah, please.
Just want to say that this works. So out of the 30 committed practitioners, about 12 have stabilized realizations, which means it's not just a glimpse and then you go back to regular life. It's like a stabilized reconfiguration and recognition of the totality of being. So it's a highly catalytic, highly effective path. You might want to have a therapist in the wings because it's highly catalytic. You know, things can get stirred up. But it's really great. I wouldn't go back. Yeah. It's a gauntlet.
Yeah,
well,
good word.
we're waking into matter, and matter's messy. So it's really a heroic journey. It's the heroic journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just can't resist saying something. That a lot of I think a lot of the appeal and attraction and draw of awakening is it's the eternal bliss, it's nirvana, it's no more problems, it's joy, it's pleasure, and we certainly get that, but we're not leaving any of the pain, suffering, discomfort, hard work behind. So this awakening encompasses it all. That's the embodied part. So for some people it can be disappointing.
But the trust and resting in being is bigger than any of it. So there's this fundamental core of okay, this is where the words fall apart. Anyway, come, I'll tell you more and come next time.
Core of yum.
Core of yum. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rumi. You probably all know this one. Margit read it a couple of days ago, and it speaks to mutuality. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So thank you all for coming.
Sorry, I just got